Good morning, everyone. It's April 8th. Welcome to Talking Data with Don. And today we'll be talking about business questions, descriptive statistics, and perhaps sources of data and maybe a tour of Python. Thank you so much. Was that Erica?
It was, yes.
Thank you so much.
No problem.
And I'll like I did yesterday or for Tuesday, I upload this to my Dr. Donald S. Walker at gmail.com, my personal professorial YouTube channel, um, because I had to go through a little bit of hoops to get that YouTube channel certified for larger videos. If you just have a regular old Gmail account and you try and upload a video of any length, like if you take a 3 hour video of your kids and then think you're going to post it to YouTube for for their grandparents to watch or whatever, it'll tell you too big and it'll hang at processing. So I posted that to my YouTube channel, but I also add the link to the classroom, so you'll see these out there every week. I'm not set on the organization for where I'm going to put the recordings. I may make just a module that is session recordings, session one, two, three, so they're easier to find. Do, 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 do. Okay, back to sharing my screen. Mhm. Okay. Okay. Everybody seeing my webpage okay? Groovy. Okay, so yeah, as we talked about yesterday somewhat, um, analysis just because you have the data, um, it can happen. I've seen it. Folks are basically looking at numbers and going, okay, but then um, it's not really driving a decision. It's not really answering a question that we then say, it could be a yes no question. It could be a question looking for a trend. It could be a question looking for an indicator. And we'll go through these using your examples. But everything starts with a question. Everything starts with a reason you're doing analysis, and then goes through the problem solving sequence, the data analysis sequence that we put in there. And everybody under foundations, all of the slides that I use are or that I've used so far are in foundations, including the two that I'll be using today. So that's our foundation. Now, some of the discussion I wanted to go through will be um, about the nature of asking questions and the nature of the granularity of those questions and how you get down to something that's measurable and answerable. Some of these I want to talk to you just about like the acronyms and whatnot, and maybe some follow-on sessions. And so I'm going to pick on, well, I think these are first in at the top of the page. So I'm going to pick on Lindsay, which was um, I thought was a good example of easy to answer questions, or at least clear data driven questions. And we'll leave it at that. I don't want to dig into GSK's um, business decisions as to what they do, if, like, how many vulnerabilities did we close, if they're not closing enough vulnerabilities. That's another business decision, but we don't need to talk about that level of depth. But how many vulnerabilities did we close over a given period? um, Lindsay, how is that in a support system?
Not currently, no.
So how do you guys track the, like, when a vulnerability gets opened, and then the time that it was open, and who's been assigned to working it, maybe, and then when it was closed. What what software tool is tracking that data?
We don't necessarily track that consistently right now.
Okay, and that would feed into that data enhancement cycle. If you wanted to answer this question, as you go through the what do we want to track data on, analyzing the data that we have. It could be that you need a tracking system, that can be off the shelf, or it can be something that you guys develop yourself. Um, but if you're being asked as a technician, if you're being asked to answer those questions, and the system won't you just don't have access to the data that you're being asked, to utilize. That's where it's really helpful to be like an advocate, where you're able to dispassionately advocate for a new system, a new capability, um, that would answer it. And then your management just has to decide whether or not it's worth building something from scratch, or buying something off the shelf. So those are all good, um, like date math. Like you can do a days between calculation in anything, in Excel, in SQL, in Python. So I'm sure we'll cover kind of the technical tools for that sort of stuff. How long did it take to close? And like a pivot chart would be good for like vulnerabilities of a certain level, and then you can look at like the time to close. And I'm still actually I'm trying to contract with an Excel guru, that can come in, and I mean, I can use Excel for all this kind of stuff, but I'm a little clumsy with it. But there's any number of tools that are going to be able to address that sort of stuff. Um, okay, I'll quit picking on Lindsay. Anybody got any questions on pulling that data down? That Nobody? And Lindsay, that could be something that you create somewhat of a data pipeline, or data warehouse, where you write the scripts that go and query those different tools, and pull it all into something unified that you can actually do your report on. It's like you can answer those questions in a reporting tool that you go and pull the data separately, or you can pull the data and into a separate warehouse, a separate pool, separate database, and then have it in there to run analysis however you might want to. Yeah, I did have a cybersecurity question. If we could, were any of the vulnerabilities exploited? How is that tracked and determined?
That's kind of a case-by-case investigation situation.
Is that tracked in a spreadsheet, or like on PowerPoint?
I don't know that we've ever had that happen, or haven't seen it happen, but I'm not sure how that process works.
Okay. Yeah, some of these things they happen so rarely that you're not really collecting data. I mean, yeah, and I would think having an exploit happen would be fairly rare. Okay, and then down to CAE. So real quick, give us before we look at your business questions, Chaz and Andra. Give us a real quick overview again of what you're doing with the aircraft training programs, and
So in a nutshell, we obviously provide training for military aviation. So what we started doing is collecting, quote, end user data from the students to see how they feel about our programs, and is it effective? Is what we're doing even working for them? And so that's how we kind of came around to these questions. Is we now have this program data, and it's now in a state where we're finally comparing apples to apples. So now we look across all of our programs, and our question is, how do they compare to each other? Can we find some programs that are maybe implementing some best practices that we can apply to our other programs? Or any programs struggling that we could maybe get some lessons learned from? And what are the distinguishing factors between all of the programs?
Okay. Yeah, and I mean, I've got the luxury of having worked with Scott and Jeremy in the last data
Mhm.
analysis, so we talked about this quite a bit.
Right, so they've kind of paved the way for our questions in a way.
Sure. And yeah, survey data. I take it that's both. I wanted to talk about survey as a data source, so that
Mhm.
includes both, scale on a scale of 1 to 5.
Right,
Hated it, loved it. That's called a Likert scale,
Mhm.
guys. If any of you, we've all seen it, but it's I think it's Lykert. A Likert scale is a way to ask a user, if they're on the fence, slightly agree, greatly agree, or a couple of scores on the negative. And a Likert scale can be 1 to 5, 1 to 7, 1 to 9. Generally speaking, that data will have a midpoint. The neither agree nor disagree, which when you're collecting data and analyzing it, that at the human level, that can often be kind of a cop out where the survey respondent sort of, I don't really even know what you're asking me. So, I don't know, five out of 9. But then, guys, you also collect textual data, like almost like a social media review, right?
Do you mean like open comments?
Open comments, yeah.
Yes, we do. Yeah, so that's part of this as well.
Okay. Are you using what approach to analyzing those open comments and turning that into data are you taking currently?
So we started to categorize them in sort of what topic they relate to. So I don't know in how much detail I could go, but whether it's related to how an instructor is teaching or how the facility looks, if there's any issues like with running water or whatever, or how the scheduling is done, things like that. So we divide it up into those key categories and then review it for any really urgent comments like safety or anything like that.
Do you mark it as positive or negative for that
Yes.
topic area? Okay.
Yeah, so that's part of the categorization. And Jeremy had developed this, I don't really know what to call it, but in our data visualization system, it basically searches for keywords and then it categorizes it for you. Now, that's not always perfect, which is why we have a validation piece to our process. So we go in and make sure that it categorized correctly and that it is in fact positive or negative. Because, everybody types it differently. There's always typos and, we can't change the voice of customer. It has to stay as is.
Gotcha. It might be considered sentiment analysis. There's a
Yes.
there's a technique that you can go through, like Facebook posts about a given topic based on their keywords, and you categorize it on a topic. It could be a product. If you're Arkansas Heart Hospital, it could be the that they're talking about the institution itself and how they felt about it. And you can categorize it as either negative, positive, or neutral, and with some granularity. And there's lots of tools out there for doing sentiment analysis. The social media platforms offer that kind of as a analysis as a service, kind of like the Google Ads analytics. If you're paying somebody to if you're paying for Google Ads and getting your stuff up to the top. They can tell you through those analytics, what people are saying about your product through Google reviews or Facebook reviews. But there's apparently the technology, the AI, the machine learning has gotten to the point where it can look at a block of text and look for all the words that would categorize a string of text as positive or negative. If you're starting to see words like horrible, terrible, sucked, it will categorize that as a negative review. And just like you said, they might have said something positive, but they used negative language to say something positive. So it does require some human intervention. Yeah. So, and one other thing, go ahead.
There's definitely a machine learning component to it, but what we found more often than not is that students typically have both in one comment. So in that case, we have to be very careful. And we figured out that dividing out that comment seems to work well.
Oh, like asking them what can we do to improve, which would be where they would have something negative to say.
Right. They'd be like, well, this instructor sucks, but this class or like the material of the class is good, or something like that.
There you
So
go.
they'll have a combination of both positive and negative with one comment.
There you go. And you'll see in this discussion board, and guys, as far as how far you want to go in depth, what you have to say to each other is probably going to be more interesting than just listening to me drone on. So please don't hesitate to contribute. And we've got 16 weeks times 8 hours a week. So we've got lots of time to talk about, no kidding, what you're doing and work and ask questions and explore these topics, just in general, so that to enhance your career as an analyst, as much as answer a focused question. But I did want to bring in something that I wasn't really familiar with before I started my my doctorate back in 2016. And that's qualitative data analysis. Most folks, when you think about quantitative data, you think about, hardcore numbers, what percentage of people are, a certain characteristic, or you think about, like the vaccine trials that we're all seeing on television, where they say it's 80% effective, and the data that they collect, did you get sick or did you not? Did you have a certain side effect or did you not? And then you have all the trial participants as your observations in that hypothesis test. That's what you normally think of, is these hardcore numbers. The trend in sales by quarter over the last 5 years, or the way the Dow Jones Industrial Average over the last 5 years, those sorts of hard numbers. But there's a field of research, a field of data analysis called qualitative analysis, where it's it's softer. It's taking observations, it's people's comments, and then you go through and you still have to have examples. You still have to have like survey responses. I could do a survey or conduct an interview and have 10, 12, 20 whatever responses, and then you start going in there and looking for trends, and it's they're starting to automate it, like you guys are talking about with the machine learning stuff, but it's very often something that you have to go through manually and start to look for trends that are a little softer and less easy to quantify to a particular number. So yeah, there are two areas of research, quantitative and qualitative. So just wanted to mention that when it came up. Any questions for Chaz or Andre as we go through? Everybody knows.
I do have a question.
Yeah, go ahead, Laura.
I was wondering, when you're evaluating which programs perform best, like what are like the metrics for that? Like, is there a certain like bar that needs to be reached with the programs for them to be considered effective? Is that already in place, or is that something that's an ongoing process?
Yeah, so like Dawn was mentioning the Likert scale. So with our data visualization tool, we basically take the average Likert score of each program. So we've set it to anything above a 4-point average Likert scale is considered, quote, good. Anything below that, we should probably start looking at, what are the real issues and maybe make some mitigations there. So yeah, great question.
And you're looking at survey data about like across different aircraft platforms? Is that like you're comparing KC-135 to C-130, that kind of thing?
No, it's more about like site locations,
Ah, okay.
like different bases, basically.
Okay, so
There-
you're
some
asking
of
the
them
same.
have similar airframes, so we can't necessarily do that so much.
But you're asking the same question of students at different training locations.
You would think, but we're not quite there.
Okay.
We've kind of, the process that Jeremy and Scott went through was to either recommend a survey to the programs that would sort of align with all the other programs, because we only have so much control. The government's kind of difficult to work with.
No.
That stays here. But they've kind of looked at, what is this question really asking? And generally, it's pretty similar across the board, just different wording. And that's how they've kind of categorized what kind of answer are we looking for here. This kind of fits into this category, so this is how we're going to categorize it. And depending on how the students answer those questions based on the Likert score, that takes that average for that category. So this is how this program is doing in the instructor category, or in the coursework category, or in the facilities category, or in how they perform in the sims.
So you've got the individual categories to compare them against each other. Have you assigned a weight to the importance of those individual categories? That's another way to score things, a weighted score.
No, because they're pretty important across the board. The one that holds the most weight are any comments having to do with safety.
Safety.
So yeah, anything that pops up with the notification related to safety, that immediately goes to the program manager.
Yeah, that's appropriate. So, and that just brought up another thought, another type of data is when you're scoring things like this is to assign a weight based on the importance of it. Not every factor that you collect a data point against will be as important as the other one. So, all right, cool. All right, thanks for the question, Laura. And then, yeah, I think you answered I was going to ask you about the how the program performs, but you talked about it in each category. And then Domo. Tell us just a little bit about Domo and what Domo is compared to maybe some other tools.
I don't know a lot of other tools, but Domo is essentially creates a pretty picture out of your data set, more or less. It does have some nice functions to take like an Excel sheet or a CSV and manipulate the data to essentially show you a graph for what your business question is. And it is pretty picky about how your Excel sheets are formulated, I guess. So it has to be all raw data, no extra spaces, blah, blah, blah.
Oh, good. We'll talk about data cleansing, and we'll go through some exercises.
Data cleansing is the most painful. Getting it into Domo is the easy part.
Sure. So I just wanted to say to you guys, when we get into Power BI, kind of like we did last time with Scott and Jeremy, you're welcome to kind of watch, but when it comes to the application, if you're using something besides Power BI, like Domo or like Tableau, you're welcome to use that tool in our course long cumulative project. That's the work related one, you know what I mean? Um, so you're welcome to do your project in Domo and present the results from that. So yeah, I don't want to saddle you guys with becoming an intermediate Power BI user if it's not in your future. That goes for everybody. Okay. All right. All right. And then we got into some of the Waco media. Now, whoever wants to talk for Waco, are are you all fairly doing the same thing, or I don't want to treat the 5 Waco folks as a monolithic team if that's not appropriate. Who wants to?
I think we're all kind of in different areas of Waco. I know Gabe and I started in the same department, but so like with me, I don't have access to any data. So that was kind of the reason for my business question was, maybe you could utilize social media to get some of your data to see if any of your younger subscribers, where they might have interest in subscribing to the paper. Because I know they collect a lot of data.
Okay. So, but you all work in the digitization of the Arkansas, the Democrat Gazette. I mean, is that?
Chase does. I'm a supervisor for the customer service department. I'm not sure where I would move once this class is over, so I wasn't sure what kind of questions we would be asking. But right now, he's in the digitalized department and I'm in the customer service department.
Okay. But the paper, except for the Sunday edition, the paper went digital, right? If you want to get the daily paper, you gotta.
Right.
Yes. The only daily paper we still have in distribution right now is the Chattanooga Times. Otherwise, we're working on moving everybody over to digital.
Okay. Yeah, it's just interesting to me. I'm one of those. I'm interested in everything. So like I said in the discussion board, it was I witnessed this disruptive technology transition firsthand with my mother-in-law. They're taking away the paper. I don't need.
Yeah.
I don't want to use an iPad. I don't know what an iPad is. So which as a computer scientist, I thought I've seen in many sliced and diced in many research projects. There's a particular theory that researchers use called the technology acceptance model, and it looks at different factors that enhance or deter someone or a team or an organization or an individual from accepting a new technology. And so when I was looking at your guys's posts yesterday, I went on a Google spree for 5 or 10 minutes, and there's quite a bit of research being done on the the print world. There was a time when newspapers and magazines had a pretty solid lock on information. And then radio and television came in and kind of chipped against that, and then the internet happened, and now a newspaper is basically a website. Correct?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Getting to be there. It's a news-oriented website now, compared to where it used to be a physical product, along with a process of content creation process and all that. So yeah, fascinating. And now, like I said, for somebody with a computer, they're probably okay, fine. I don't want to go out on the lawn and pick up a paper anyway. And they're Googling things and reading the news all day, which just transforms the entire industry. But for your no kidding person that wants to read the paper and that's all they want to do with a computer, that's a pickle. I came up with a lot of ideas that I'm sure your folks have already thought of. I've never had an original thought in my head, but there's a lot of ways to do that. You can do surveys, out at the Riverwalk or at the mall or whatever, and ask these questions. Why did you stop your subscription? Yes. Why? And you give them a gift certificate for $5 at the Chick-fil-A or whatever, but you can collect that data. You can collect, Likert scale empirical data, as to, are you likely, not likely, absolutely not going to, you can create that scale and collect data that way and see, particularly to the markets in that are of interest to you. But then, like, what can we do to counteract the decline? That is like that's a great business question, but it needs, you need to peel the onion on it to see how you would measure steps that you've taken that stop the decline, or maybe somebody has researched that, like Gartner or whatever, and has looked at how do local newspapers stop the decline in subscribership in the digital era or whatever. So no, those are fascinating. Like, are they stopping due to the price of the subscription, the lack of the iPad? Yeah, that's all. Have you guys, has Waco or the Democrat Gazette or anybody done a data collection project like that, where you've gone out and collected survey data in person, or mailed it out, or gone, Survey Monkey or anything like that?
That would be more of an Aaron question. I'm not
Sure.
sure.
Aaron?
Yeah, I don't know that we have gone out and done like a survey like that, but I do know we have, I believe, an exit survey. So when somebody unsubscribes, we ask them what the reason for unsubscribing was. And so we do get a stop reason code, which we can use to kind of determine like what is the most common reason for stopping.
Yeah, to kind of play off that, our reps are supposed to ask every time someone calls in to cancel why they're canceling, and we're supposed to code it in the system.
Are you seeing that data being reported and used?
Again, that would be more of an Aaron question.
I don't. We do have a report that shows it, but I don't know that we've ever really dug into it to look for what, like, the popular stop reasons.
Okay. Yeah, if that number, or that, if you don't have an analyst in the room, and it may not be you, it may be, I don't know, Priyanka or Sam or somebody up in your hierarchy. But if you're, reporting on numbers like that and no one ever asks you about it, or, you know what I mean? You're not ever asked to be in the meeting when those numbers are being discussed, in case somebody has, in management, has a question about it. In my experience, if that's the case, where you do this analysis and you never hear anything, you never hear a word about it, they're not acting on it. Your management doesn't really know what to do with that data, or it's not an imperative, and they just wait for that part of the presentation, that part of the board meeting or whatever, to be done. But in the trenches, there's not a lot you can do about that. But it's just something to kind of look out for. As a manager, they tell you measure what's important, and you can only act on what you measure, and and vice versa. So if you're asking people why they canceled their subscription, but then you're not trying, your management as an organization, you're not trying, experimenting with strategies to prevent that next time, you know what I mean, to look at those trends and do something about it. It almost begs the question, why are you asking people that? But that's kind of a management thing. Okay. Yeah, and I went in that next window. I went into a little bit of a diatribe about qualitative research, but I already covered that. Those surveys will produce, especially if they're textual, and you're asking people in a comment block to say something, that'll result in a lot of qualitative data that you kind of got to mine through to look for trends but you can do it. You can say, 80, even if it's an open comment, you can go through there manually and say that 83 people in one place or the other, 83 people mentioned cost, and it's called coding. You code these qualitative responses. They might have said money, they might have said cost, they might have said, expensive. All of those are the same basic data point in a qualitative research project, and you would code them all to be cost was a factor, and you can then start to put percentages against your responses and whatnot. Okay, and then Laura, your stuff looked like just benchmark data analysis, like maybe you just did a data analysis professional development program or something.
I may have, but it's like my role is really in the fundamentals of marketing analytics. I mean, that's the kind of stuff that programs like Google Analytics automates, but that aren't as established for more niche or specific platforms like Walmart.com data. There's not like a Walmart.com alternative or Google Analytics, not straight ahead. There are some people in that space, but
okay, so these are keywords. These are keywords being typed in when I go to Walmart.com and I'm looking for a new gazebo for the backyard. Yep. These are keywords being typed into the Walmart website as opposed to big Google getting them. Okay.
Yep.
Okay. So it's in Walmart.com. I mean, you're is the web, are your IT folks, have they engineered the website to exfiltrate that data into some kind of a log file? Or
we use an API, and I'm not clear on whether that's provided by Walmart, like they collect the data and then have given us access to that, or if we crawl the website and scrape the data. I think in some cases, I think it's a little bit of both, because we do pull data on like where different products rank for different searches. And that might be just a scrape of a web page every day. And then, but the actual search volume, I think, is collected by Walmart.
I'd love to see the structure of that. I just as a programmer with some limited amount of web design knowledge, each search is a transaction conducted by a unique site visitor, and it's a string of text that they typed in. I'm just curious what that raw data
it's a lot of data.
Yeah, well, yeah.
I don't know. I haven't seen any like individual tracking like that you can connect it to a certain user or any demographic information or where people are searching from. I'm sure that exists, but that's not something I've encountered yet.
Sure. And the answers to these questions, what keywords related to a certain product, and what keywords resulted in a ranking, is that being provided to you by an analytical product that's currently in action, or is that where you're moving towards?
So that's kind of where the expertise of so a lot of people who work for the company have experience in that consumer retail space. And so in terms of what keywords are we tracking, it's really based on like what keywords do we think people are searching. And then we have to tell Walmart that we want access to that search volume. So it's kind of, they don't give us access to like every single keyword. That's kind of impossible. You have to tell it like, we're interested in these terms. And so it's kind of both, like who has experience in this space, you know, what kind of terms are frequently come up, like what does our buyer look like? You know, so it's both figuring out what do we think the terms are and then testing like what's the volume on those terms. And it gets pretty complicated when you add all the products in, like there are millions of SKUs on Walmart.com. So thinking of keywords that might be important for an entire portfolio of products. Some of our clients have hundreds of products on Walmart.com. So thinking of the right keywords for each product or group of products. It's a lot, but they've automated that. You know, you can tell Walmart you want 100 keywords. What's the search volume on all of them?
Okay. Hey, this is an example of me getting really interested in what you guys are doing and losing track of time. It's 9:21. Somebody should have said, Don, stop talking at 9:15. And we should have taken a 15-minute break because everybody needs to, you know, get up, stretch, check their email, maybe check their phones, make a call. So I want to take a 15-minute break every hour. So you're all being reprimanded for letting me yammer on. Okay. All right. So let's take a break till 9:35, say 9:35 cell phone time. And we'll pick up where we left off with these the data landscape and burning questions that you guys are answering. All right, see you back at 9:35. And I'm gonna pause recording. Okay, and we're back. Let me share our business questions. I hope you guys are finding utility in this. To me, this is critical. Critical to understanding, you know, why we're doing what we're doing and strategically how we're going to get the data and all that. The actual mechanics of the tools, that's a whole nother challenge. What menu does what and what click, where do I click, and all that. But the big picture, strategic picture of what we're trying to accomplish with this this analysis and how to get the data, where's the data exist. To me, it's really important. I hope you agree. I can see Laura, Gabe, and Chase. I hope everybody else is giving me a thumbs up. Okay. Yeah, good examples. Laura, I did want to, we'll talk about what an API is. You mentioned a way of accessing data that I'll cover here in a few minutes when we get done with this discussion. And ransomware statistics. So Erica, it looks like you're doing industry-wide research. Is that correct?
Yeah, somewhat. It kind of, yeah, it's ransomware over every vertical. And it's the type of data that is actually better the further you get away from, you know, where you can see an entire year, because then the statistics will be, you know, more accurate when you look at it for an entire year. The verticals targeted, you know, was 1 month more heavy than another, you know, things like that. So.
Okay, so this is not, is this to inform, you're with GlaxoSmithKline, right?
Yes.
Is this to inform management or to be used for like budgeting decisions based on your company's assessment of the threat out there? What's going on?
Yeah, I mean, it's, ransomware is an issue for everybody.
Mm.
And so, yeah, I think in any organization, they would be probably interested to see statistics, because then you can, see what ransomware family, let's say, is more prevalent, because their attack vectors are going to be different than maybe a different ransomware family. So if you can see, hey, this is the group that is really big right now and they're targeting Windows systems, then we need to, make sure our patches are installed. We need to, and so, and some ransomware families will target industries more than others. Some go after education sector, some go after healthcare, really just depends. So knowing what the popular one is at the time, if you will, the most common, also helps protect your organization.
Okay. So is this something that is going to be your you think this is going to be your project for this course that you'll present on the graduation day?
I mean, it certainly could, yes. I mean, it's I didn't think of it that way, but it's not a bad one, because it obviously doesn't reveal anything confidential to to GSK. It's more of a broad, I guess, something broad that I would face, that I guess I would deal with. But yeah, that's not a bad idea.
Yeah, you're welcome to. I think we would all learn more about you. You guys have all heard of ransomware, right? Where a malicious email comes in with a malicious link or attachment. You click on it, and it freezes up every shared drive that you as a user have access to, basically. And it's painful to recover from, because you basically got to wipe everything and reinstall from a backup. Meanwhile, the network's down and whatnot. And if you don't pay them, and I've heard, in the reading in the press, sometimes they'll lock your stuff up, and they're such yahoos, they don't even know how to unlock it. And so you can maybe pay the ransom, and these goobers can't even come through with their part of the deal. So it's just horrible mayhem. So yeah, Erica, that would be a great project, using the tool of your choice to analyze the data that you're pulling from out there, I guess, on the internet. And we've got there are like computer response databases, right? Are there not, that are these government websites that report the result, that report incidents, that you'd be pulling this from?
It's actually, there's quite a bit of sources that you can get, on the internet. Mostly it's like security companies that, you would have like a FireEye or somebody that have teams of people that collect these data points and statistics, and then, aggregate them into one report. So you can look at over every vertical, what was the percentage, or, things like that. So it's typically, the government websites would be one source, but typically it's these security companies that are pooling that data and presenting it in a report.
Okay. Fascinating. Yeah, that'll work great. And then, yeah, Thomas, let's talk a little bit more about, so working at Arkansas Hospital. Go into a little more detail here. Who the user is, when you said what's the user trying to accomplish, and the purpose.
Okay, so again, my talk being brief here, what I've seen is the accounting department is a big portion of the user group. There are some others, different areas of the hospital. I'm not exactly sure, the names of the departments and such just yet. But I know we do work a lot with accounting. And as far as like, reasons why they need the info is more along the lines of, what they're trying to accomplish. Are they looking for it for a, I guess, purely financial, or are they looking for, some other motivation to, try and analyze the data?
So are you providing raw data to communities to do their own analysis?
No,
Or?
no, we will throw it into Tableau, or I think we use Power BI some, but not a lot. So mostly it kind of depends on what they're asking for. Some groups may want it in, a dashboard, others may want it just in a Excel spreadsheet. And it kind of depends on, how basic of something they're wanting. If it's for their own personal use, it may be something really simple. It may be just raw data, but usually, from what I can tell so far, usually they want some sort of spreadsheet or dashboard. I think dashboards get used quite a bit.
Okay. So you have a SQL prompt. You can go in and you can take a person's question and you can, select columns from table and create a raw data set that you've got
Yes.
permissions to do that.
Essentially, yes.
In how many different databases are we talking about?
I haven't seen them all. But
Yeah, you're really
yeah.
new, right, Thomas?
Yes.
Yeah.
But I know there are, I can't really put a number to it, but, I would say for a company this size, it would be average as far as the database amount.
No, I'm just thinking like, there are homegrown databases that are custom developed, and you've got a database development team that designs the tables and the connections and all that. But then there are and this is kind of leading into the next session, is there are functional support systems that are off the shelf. Sometimes they're, cloud-based software as a service, and you just go onto your web browser and log in, and sometimes they give you an SQL prompt into those tables, but oftentimes they don't. So I'm just wondering how many, like if you got, your patient data, are you querying out of like, patient records? Or are you querying out of just support systems that don't involve patient data? You know what I mean? How's that laying out?
I don't really know. I think from what I can tell so far is it may be several different resources to pull from. I'm sure we do some with the records, but again, I'm pretty new, so I haven't been exposed to a lot of it.
Okay, fair enough. And that data collection process, you'll see certifications for data engineer. There's a Google certified data engineer, there's a Microsoft associate level data engineer, and they're the guys that use, normally it's either like a Power Query or SQL Server, information services, and you can pull stuff from different databases and line it up and use it for analysis, and they kind of create those pipelines. Otherwise, the analyst is having to extract, transform, and analyze individually every time, which is where I was when in my one in my 1 year in the trenches. I had to go out literally every day and pull down a spreadsheet of the same, and go through the same transformations and generate the same pivot tables, because we didn't have any way of scripting or automating the data engineering. So
Right. I know they, if it's something's requested, pretty regularly, then it's, an effort's made to automate it. So.
All right, cool. All right. Then we got a little bit more Waco stuff. Aaron, your second bullet there, that was the monetary value of an email capture. I understand each individual word in that sentence, but what does all that together mean, and how would you measure that?
Yeah, I think it would it would kind of, it would depend kind of on what our lifetime value of a customer is, and determining, for example, if we collect 100 emails and we have a 1% subscription rate, we have one person out of 100 emails subscribe, then how can we calculate the value of every email that we collect?
Are people subscribing to it to get email alerts, that kind of thing? Is it?
Yeah, they're subscribing for newsletter alerts. They're also creating free accounts using their email.
That's right. So your paid subscription is considered more of a premium.
Yeah.
Premium account, right?
Yeah.
Okay, and then the other one looks like it's content recommendation for your journalists to your own recommended articles system.
Yeah. Right now we have a vendor that we use for this, but we would like to develop something where we can take our own data that we collect on people, what types of articles they're reading, and then be able to present recent article headlines based on their interests.
Okay, so developing a classifier basically that would be the similar to Amazon's. People that bought that also bought this kind of
right
recommendation engine. Yeah.
I don't know if that's some kind of like scoring system for certain words like politics or sports. Not really sure.
I don't know. I know the basic mechanics of what a classifier does, but I don't know how you would, as far as web traffic, how you would categorize those elements and then provide some sort of label. I don't know. That's something maybe we can look into. And I had to look up BigQuery. That's in Google's tool suite, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm working with someone that got a nonprofit workforce development, kind of like my organization. Actually, I don't know if I made that clear, guys. I work for Arkansas Center for Data Sciences. In addition to facilitating these courses, I'm the overall training director. So I started in January, and I help Bill and Lonnie and Marie and Kelsey and those folks find training providers and then manage them. And then I develop a custom curriculum based on working with the employers. Like Sam at Waco, he was interested in more than just data analysis, so we might do some other apprenticeships for other tasks. So that's what I do. It's a 20-hour a week gig. Like I said, I'm a 30-year retired lieutenant colonel, so I'm in a great place in my middle age. So I work 20 hours a week for Arkansas Center for Data Sciences, and I teach these, and I'm adjunct faculty for a couple of colleges. So you'll occasionally talk, hear me talk about my job with ACDS, which is beyond just this course, I guess is what I wanted to make sure. Yeah. So I'm working with a nonprofit like ACDS. They got 20, 30,000 free subscriptions to, you might have seen them advertised if you watch YouTube and you're into professional development. They're a Google certified professional certificates. There's one on user interface, there's one on data analytics, one on project management, and IT support generalist. And the data analytics one is I watched a 10-minute video. It sounds pretty good. It would be a good alternative to this course. It uses R and Tableau instead of Python and Power BI. But it's a lot of the same basic things. But they got like 20,000 licenses, which I think equates to being like a 6-month subscription to Coursera, is the online training provider that Google uses. So you would get that for free, and when you're done, you get a certificate of completion, and you get entered into a talent pool. Google has partnered with a whole lot of major companies, and it's all part of, you know, make America smart again, workforce development kind of things. So I'm working with them. I'll certainly have made progress over the next 4 months. So maybe we'll talk more about that. And Aaron, if you could tell me what LTV is.
Yeah, that's lifetime value. So it's kind of it's a combination of what our average rate is, our retention rates, and number of starts that we get in a month.
So do you have a current model for calculating LTV?
We do, kind of. We go back and forth on how to calculate different aspects of it, like average rate and the retention rate. I mean, it's an estimate based on historical, but we kind of do. that helps.
Okay. Yeah, BigQuery. That's what got me on that 10-minute tangent. BigQuery is owned by Google, part of their Google Cloud Platform Analytics that you could potentially learn. We could all learn. I'd love to have the time to dig into all these things. And then Damon. So you're pretty new with Heart Hospital, right? How long you been with them?
Arkansas Blue Cross Blue Shield, and yeah, I am pretty new. I think it's about 5 months now. I've been working with them, so since like the middle of November.
Okay. Now, are your business questions focused in Arkansas? You know, vulnerable communities in Arkansas, for example, your question A.
Yeah, so that first question I actually got from my boss, and the other 3 are questions that I kind of, I guess you could say, derived from the notes that I've taken over the past month or so. We occasionally will meet with other, I guess you could say, team members or people from other departments, and we'll try to kind of address some of their needs. And a few of those are questions that they've kind of brought up before.
Okay. So these are great challenges. I would just generically say that any question that starts with how is going to decompose into one or many more questions that really more start with what. Like what is the cost of chronic condition X statewide? What is the cost of chronic condition X in a certain whether you're using zones or zip codes or regions or whatever, and then you would start to then you could start to compare against that. But yeah, how do we do something as you go through your data, your process? I'm sure you'll find more detailed questions that are answerable more directly. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because
my boss and I call those rabbit holes that we go down.
Yeah, but I mean, because yours particularly, Damon, that is prime fodder for some PhD in healthcare analytics dissertation. I mean, those questions are exactly what somebody doing a dissertation, which is an original new research project, would do. But those are research questions, but then they have to be decomposed down into some sort of generally quantifiable variable, so that you can say that, let's say a chronic condition, COPD, from or smoking related diseases, if you want to group them all together, are 75% more expensive in vulnerable communities. And then you have to define vulnerable communities, because as you're necking down the data and reporting the results, people are going to ask you, where'd you get those numbers? What's a vulnerable community? Exactly what data point did you use to categorize a vulnerable community? And then, exactly how did you categorize chronic conditions? And, that's good, because we're going to talk about different types of, a categorical variable, which would be a health condition would be a great example of a categorical variable.
Yeah.
And predictive analytics, that's you get into discussing, the leading indicators. You can look at a phenomenon that happened and then look at other associated stuff, and you can start to see that, oh, sure enough, before every before every COVID spike, there was a holiday or some mass spreader event. It's like as sure as night follows day, there are leading indicators that will predict something else happening, but you don't always see them until kind of like it's after the fact. But all right, cool.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Oh, keep going.
That's one of the things that we looked at, was just kind of tracking the COVID cases over time, and we could see in November and whatnot, in December, the spikes come up from holidays and everything. So yeah.
Yep. And like I've got a few friends in healthcare and providers, and the delay, like you're saying, the delayed care. People were not getting mammograms. They weren't getting colonoscopies. They didn't go in to get that lump checked because it's COVID.
Right.
I'll catch COVID in the hospital, and there's for any number of reasons. So actually assigning the data to the fact that a condition was deferred due to the pandemic, that to me would be a challenge. Is where do you stick that in the patient's record? Where do you stick that in the database? Because that's not something you would normally collect from somebody, and across time, you don't normally get asked, was your visit delayed by the pandemic? So sometimes you gotta
Right.
figure out how you're gonna collect that data, and that's up to strategically, that's up to your organization. But the individual analyst in the trenches that's being asked to answer these questions, that's where you and your boss and your analytics working group or whatever get together, and you come up with a wish list. Well, if you want to know the answers to these questions, guys, it's going to take an investment in collecting that data and storing it appropriately. And this is what you need to collect for us if you want us to analyze that data and give you some answers.
Yeah, and that's frequently the issue. I think I said that in that post, that just a lot of things aren't tracked. I think the company as a whole is starting to recognize the importance of data, so it's slowly but surely getting better. But yeah, there's just not always the pieces that you need to answer those kind of questions. But yeah, it's important, like you said, to just identify what you need, so then at least someone can maybe make a move in getting that information to you. So yeah,
sure. But that's a big ship. The Titanic couldn't turn to avoid the iceberg, and something as big as Blue Cross Blue Shield or the American healthcare system doesn't turn overnight. Like, it took years and years and years and years and years and years and years for domestic abuse and whatnot. But now they ask you, do you feel safe at home? It seems like every time I've gone to the doctor lately, that has become a prescribed question, just like, how are you feeling? They want to know if you feel safe at home. So the pandemic could come and go by the time the wheels turn to collect the data that you would like to have now in midstream.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's one of the complicated parts. if you want to track how people might feel about vaccines or something like that, or how likely they might be to get a vaccine, you might need to kind of collect the data on how they feel about it, and that just takes a lot of time. So, you know, the state could be mostly vaccinated by the time it's done. So, tricky things like that, you know, but I don't know, one day at a time, I guess.
There you go. Okay, so I'll stop sharing that, and yeah, I'll try and knock out this next one in the next 12 minutes because we've kind of gone over this sort of stuff. Stop sharing that. Share something else. I wanted to go over, and a lot of this, I mean, you know, is just foundational vocabulary, guys, just so that we all get it kind of on the same page. And I can't get through a data analysis apprenticeship and you guys be able to say, well, no, we never talked about, you know, X, Y, or Z, because we've got to cover it, even though it's not particularly exciting and it's kind of death by PowerPoint. I understand. Death by PowerPoint. That's the name of a band I'm going to create. Death by PowerPoint. All right, share sources and types of data. So I did want to, everybody seeing my, is everyone dying by my PowerPoint? Can you see it? I get the award for most single most boring presentations ever.
But I've noticed that the ones that are loaded into our dashboard are a little different. I printed mine out and some of those.
That's before I told you it's ready to go. Remember I told you there's old cluttered up crap in there? Yeah, that's.
Well, I printed this out this morning.
No way.
Yeah.
I must have just replaced it. I'm sorry. It's the same information. It's the same information. Yeah. I think I added a line or two online here, but I have since gotten rid of the old one, I believe. Let me look. Let me look. I'm driving down Highway 40 in my Bill pickup truck. Katie? Let's see. Source type today. Yeah, if it's got DAAT, that's my naming convention for everything data analysis apprenticeship training. If it's got that in front of it with the 16th of March, which was the very first day, it means it's new. Otherwise, there's a good chance that it's not, these old files and whatnot here. So I'm sorry, Gabe.
That's okay. I've got a pencil. I can write it down.
Well, I think it's just I changed the format. I did the last apprenticeship I did. I was the director at the Coding Academy at UCA, so everything is branded with Go Bears purple, you know. and this time I took what I developed and dumped it into this green and blue is the ACDS sort of color scheme that they've kind of picked up on. So there you go. All right. So sources of data that you will use for your this is reality, not your Excel project, not any exercises for the course, but in reality, a functional area support system is a generic term for a system that folks out there in your organization are using. It can be everything from your accounting, your billing system. It could be customer resource management software, anything, you know, internal operations support systems for, like, you know, inventory management, your supply chain management, ERP systems, any of that kind of, you know, off the shelf, though, is really what I kind of want to focus on, as far as is that would be something that, you know, you either install in-house or more increasingly you're seeing it being software as a service, which is basically just subscribing to that functionality and using your web browser to get to it. A good example would be Salesforce. That was that's a huge customer relationship management capability. And it's very powerful, but it also is, it basically requires a developer to make it work for your company. It's very difficult to configure out of the box. and it's easy for one worker to screw up data entry screens and reports for everybody else. So they very often centralize that. But it could be something kind of generic like SharePoint. There are a lot of companies that will have an internal employee portal where you can share documents and discussions and announcements and calendars and stuff like that using Microsoft SharePoint. And sometimes you will need to pull data from these functional area support systems. And that's where I was going into with Thomas. You may or may not have access to a raw query prompt. There are times when those functional area support systems will have reports that you can generate, and then you can download the data from them, but it'll be in like a CSV, a flat Excel looking file. So you just, your access to those will vary. And then you'll have custom databases that your company might have designed, and those you've got a better chance of getting access to writing your own queries, again using SQL, which we'll learn in the course here. But then, as we were talking with Erica about, was that you, Erica, or Lindsay, about the cybersecurity ransomware stuff?
That was me, Erica.
Erica, yeah. I'll get better and better at remembering individual guys. I apologize. So yeah, government websites, man, there are, just Google it. there's a particular, it's like data.gov. It's public domain data sets for just a staggering amount of things going on out there from our different government agencies, where you can pull data from like Bureau of Labor and Statistics is a pretty good example, where people are doing like economic development, and they'll use data sets coming out of BLS and those things that can tell everything from, income levels and education levels and job series and unemployment rates, all those sorts of salary rates, all those sorts of things. So if you're bouncing your ideas, your corporate data off of the general public, a lot of that data is open source. A few of you mentioned commercial providers providing data. That's particular, like marketing data. If you want to compare your vertical against the rest of the industry, you can purchase that sort of data, and sometimes it will be in relational form, somewhat, but a lot of times when you're getting data from outside sources like this, the good old flat file is ubiquitous. Academic and research institutions like Pew Research is one of the ones you'll see that have really great, like they'll do surveys, and you can go through and you can slice and dice survey data on any number of topics. I put the link in the page here. So yeah, Gabe, read. No, I had it in the old one. So if you downloaded that old one, the links are the same. And that might be something, the Pew Research stuff might affect your work. There may be something in Pew Research about, vulnerable communities and chronic disease. There may be something in there about the digitization of traditional print media already. So as you're kind of working through these areas, make sure data.gov. Make sure you're checking these websites. But then one of the things that's on the horizon for folks like you that are coming into this career and starting off in your careers is IoT devices and the Internet of Things, and big data analysis. So I wanted to throw that one in there. There's just staggering amount of data out there coming in from cameras and traffic sensors, and there's smart city devices. They've got like gunshot detectors, and and then you throw in the fact that all of us carry around a massive data generating machine, that literally, with your GPS location and your texts, and for all we know, every word I just said is is being transmitted and stored by. Have you ever had your phone where a situation where you're sure it was eavesdropping on you?
Siri all the time.
Absolutely.
I
I
was
actually have if I may derail for a second, I have a really weird example of that. So this one time I was talking to a friend and we were wondering what a word meant. And so I said, hey Siri, what does blah, blah, blah mean? And then the friend actually ended up defining that word for me. But then Siri was like, you were saying?
Wow.
Yeah.
There you go. Yeah, I was walking through a flea market in St. Petersburg, Florida, telling a buddy of mine that I had done an LED lighting project and had some good luck with it. And I mean, literally, we were walking side by side. My phone's in my pocket, and and I felt in my pocket, and I pulled out my phone, and it was the Amazon app. I have since turned notifications off. It was the Amazon app letting me know that LED lights were on sale. And not just LED lights. I mean, LED strip lights, which is a 12-volt thing that you can do in your car or boat or RV. And I'm like, holy mackerel! This, I mean, the chances of that happening, throughout the week are pretty good. I mean, I had bought some LED strip lighting from Amazon, but the fact that I was mentioning it to my friend and in mid conversation, my phone buzzed. Yeah. So.
Yeah, my previous job, me and I think there was 3 or 4 of us gathered together talking about, I can't remember, something non-business related. And when the conversation was over, we all went back to our desks. 2 of us had advertisements pop up.
And all you were doing was talking about it. You weren't
Right.
Googling it, right?
Right.
Because
Correct.
that, I mean, that cookie, if you Google something, that's public. You've
Right.
made it. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
There you
No.
go. There you
So.
go. Anyway, all right, guys. Let's take 15, and we'll come back, and I'll wrap this up, and then we will get into very basic statistics. More death by PowerPoint. See you back here at 10:30. And I'm going to pause recording. I think it's a homophone or homonym. I think that's the same utterance, but it's spelled different ways, like there, and where, and where, and where. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. Whoop, wrong glasses. Anybody else got to have 2 pairs of glasses? Your regular walking around spectacles so you don't bump into things, and then you've got your special computer glasses. Or is it just me on my birthday?
No, gotta have a pair of computer glasses.
That special pair. I had a coworker tell me that the UV blocker readers were particularly good at avoiding eye fatigue, but I haven't given them a shot yet.
That's what I wear.
There you
Yeah,
go.
I have blue light blockers on my glasses, and it helps a lot.
Oh yeah.
There you go. So, so those of you that I did not pick on in the discussion board, if you would please go back and pitch in, even if it's adding on to one of your coworkers. But I know there's a few of you that haven't posted to that yet.
So for Waco, Dawn, like Aaron, so Aaron and Priyanka and I, like we all work on the same team, and a lot of what Aaron put on there is stuff that is like directed by our boss or by me. And so like since there's so many of us, like how would you like us to handle that? Because between Aaron and Gabe, like they put everything on there that we are looking at, or going to want to look at for, our project, or for, because right now I'm like going back through and looking at the business research questions. And like, yeah, everything that Aaron put on there, the average rate, the LTV, like all of that is all stuff that we discussed internally. And then Aaron just like posted it. So,
well, he certainly didn't post everything, right? He couldn't have covered everything. So I would challenge you to give it some thought. I know I'm being
okay,
difficult.
well,
If it's a complete ditto, then you can just go in there and so I know that you have access to the classroom. You're in there. You know what I mean. You're engaged with it. But I would bet if you thought about it, there's some other stuff in there, or a refinement of those. Some of those are like, kind of strategic. If you see one of your coworkers posting something that's that needs to be subdivided into further, more analytical questions, that it wouldn't be inappropriate for you to add on, like, piggyback like that. And Priyanka, I know you're new and in a leadership role. I would really like to know what your process wise, what that's going to look like, and how your leadership is feeding you as the leader of your analytics group questions that you can then digest, and your role in all of that, because we're all at some point probably, if we're doing analytics, going to move into where we're mentoring other analysts, if not leading the effort. So yeah, if you haven't pitched in to that discussion, I would appreciate it if you do. Now, I am recording, yes. Back to these sources of data. There's another one here that is just staggering. Kaggle.com has data sets and in all kinds of different industries, but they also publish some code, some research. There are Jupyter notebooks, which I think I'll give you a tour of this hour, maybe next hour. There's code samples out there where they're showing just visualization and analysis and machine learning examples. I was looking at one yesterday that was a machine learning exercise on the Titanic survivors and predicting the survivability, or at least classifying the survivability of a Titanic sinking survivor based on the different categories of data that they had on people: male, female, what class of ticket they held, those sorts of things. And it used machine learning to categorize the likelihood of somebody's survival versus like statistical correlation kind of thing. It was interesting, but it's out there. The data that the data sets and the in some cases the code itself, but a lot of data. I saw a database out there that's already in relational database form, like Oracle, or that you would use structured query language to write queries against. It was already in relational form for the NBA, and he updates it daily. So if you're one of those sports stats folks, there's just Kaggle, yeah, Kaggle.com, 2Gs, just incredible amount of data out there to play with. And then do it yourself, DIY data. Sometimes you've got to collect the data yourself. It could be that you're going out, like particularly like Erica's pulling data from industry. It could be that you get it in such raw format that you're almost having to fat finger it into something, depending on how much how much data you're talking about. It could be, and by DIY, I don't mean you yourself as an analyst. It's kind of like as the organization, you may have to go collect new data, and that could be in the form of the subscriber surveys we were talking about with the Waco folks. The data doesn't exist, so you've got to go source it yourself. And then data sets come in different forms. These aren't data types, which we'll get into as we talk about, like Python and Excel and everything. There are data types like integer and date and string, but these are your formats that you usually see. CSV is the king of all. But you'll still see some tab delimited data where they use a tab character instead of a comma. I was working with fixed length data just not so many months ago in reporting to the state of Arkansas on scholarship recipients. They require all the colleges to report enrollment data and scholarship recipient data in a fixed length text file, so that every, like name was 20 characters, and if your name's 21, oh well, they just truncate it right there. And they provided a data description that talked about, the first 20 characters of this file are name, the second 3 characters are the school year or whatever, and so every column had a fixed amount, and it's horribly inefficient, especially visually. You're looking at this, there's just a lot of white space, and anyway, but they're out there. And then of course XLS, a lot of the data sets that you'll see on like Kaggle or government websites have already been saved in XLS, but it's about 3 mouse clicks between a CSV and an XLS, so it doesn't really matter. And then JSON, JavaScript object notation, and the next one on the next line, XML, extensible markup language. These are they're text, so you can pull them up in like Notepad and read them. But they're text files that satisfied kind of a niche for transferring chunks of data, text and fields and stuff between basically mostly between like web pages and databases, but it expanded from there. But the gist of it, and we'll look at some point in the course here, but the gist of it is that instead of being like CSV, where there's usually a header and then the data in a column, and then another header and then data in the column, and that's it. You get columns across the top, and that's all you get. A JSON file or an XML file can actually be, every data item is tagged. So it'll be like an HTML tag with the brackets, the angle brackets on the outside, and you'll say like name, and then there'll be the value of name, and then whatever else is kind of in that record that goes together, and then that'll repeat and repeat and repeat. But you can also nest data within those files so that it looks a little bit more like what we'll learn is relational data, which is the third bullet there. Relational data, and we'll go, in about 3 weeks, we'll go through relational database design and how tables and columns and rows and how these databases work. But it's basically like, if you had an employee database and each employee was allowed to have, or you wanted to track their children, you wouldn't put it all in one giant people table. Or if you had employees and you had working groups that they could be members of, you wouldn't want to have in your employee table, you wouldn't want to have working group 1, working group 2, working group 3 that this person can belong to, because they can belong to 1 or 30 working groups. So what you create is a way to track what employee is in what working group, what employees in what we're working. And then if you want details about the working group, you put that over there in a working group table. So we'll go through all that and learn how SQL pulls that related data together in a query. Unstructured data is more like what we were talking about with the qualitative data. It's just a blob of text. It could be Wikipedia pages. It could be social media posts, pictures, which are becoming quite the data source. I think um, digital image recognition is just fascinating, and it's going to be a big deal really quickly. I think. I mean, because you right now, you could query the DMV database to say how many Chevrolet pickups are registered in Pulaski County. But then pretty soon you'll be able to query, Google Maps, Google Street View camera views and say how many Chevy pickup trucks are in Pulaski County, and it'll, you know, comb through those images and identify the number of Chevy pickup trucks or whatever the case may be. There's applications in security, law enforcement, but advertising, census data, demographic data collection. It's just, I don't know, image recognition is just fascinating for me. But then this last one, Laura mentioned with regard to pulling data out of the Walmart.com website. And API stands for Application Programming Interface. And what that is just a fancy way of saying that you can write a program, a computer program that accesses data from another computer program, but it's in a very structured format. And there are techniques to make sure that the program that's grabbing the data out of, say, Walmart.com through its API is authorized to do so. There are APIs available from from the big providers, Google, Facebook, everybody. Twitter, that you've heard of, offers an API that you can pull data down into something like R or Python, or even you can pull that data out as an XML. But it's very structured. The API has fields that it knows exist down in the database, and you don't care how that API gets your data. You just pass it the parameters that you want to use for it to search on, and it returns fields like name, age, whatever, mouse click, IP address, whatever the case may be, into your program, so that you can then manipulate it. And a lot of times it's it's a row per fetch, but it'll also bring back something, depending on the way it's engineered, it'll bring back a set of data. So yeah, APIs, and we will access one API or the other. I got a couple of buddies that are heavy into Python programming, and we'll show how that works. And then I wanted to say categories of data, and this is feeding into the next discussion somewhat. There are, as far as data that can be analyzed with statistics, there are categories of data that we talk about. The first is a categorical data. That's like where your age group, or there are Department of Education level categories for people. Could be male, female. So that's a type of data, and you treat that category of data, categorical category, you treat it differently when you're running statistics on it. And there's nominal means there's no particular ranking to the category that you're putting the data in, and ordinal means that there is some order, or like a the responses in a Likert scale on a survey, I believe would be ordinal data from I hate it to I love it, because there's some sense of order in those categories, as opposed to like if you're a zoologist and you're out there taking observations in the woods, if you were counting mammals versus birds and reptiles, there's no real ranking. You know what I mean? No order to those. So those would be nominal categorical data. And then two types of numerical data, and again, these are treated differently within the models and the mathematics that statisticians use. Those are discrete and continuous. Continuous is, you may use an integer, which is classically an integer value is a discrete value, because something is either 1 or it is 2 or it is 3. It's not in between those. In discrete math, you use a whole lot of binary. Something is either 0 or it is 1, and you do all kinds of zeros and anding and nanding and noring and whatnot for those discrete numerical variables. But a lot of times, they may be represented in an integer, which may, technically be discrete, but it's very often just a continuous variable, or it's meant to be a continuous variable. It just doesn't have any decimal places. But that's continuous. Is that it's not 1 or 2. It's any number in between 1 and 2, with however many decimal places that your data happens to carry. And like particularly like continuous numerical data is what you would use to do your classic correlation, where you do the scatter plot and the line is, if it's a perfect 45-degree angle, it's a perfect correlation value of 1. So those are, and then you've got date time. I threw that in there because we do so much work on that. I'm sorry, I think it was Lindsay, right, that was talking about the time between closing. I know it was one of my cyber folks.
Yes, that was probably me.
Lindsay, yeah. Whew. 57-year-old noggin remembering. So yeah, if you're doing days between, you'll have that category of data. And then of course, if you're doing any kind of projections, like we see in all the COVID reporting, there will be a date and time associated with a given number that you'll have to deal with. So I think we might have kind of already burned through most of these questions. Yeah, you guys see anything new on these three, or did we talk about this with the extended business question discussion?
I don't know that we really discussed the challenges being faced. Some people might have voluntarily thrown it out there, but
let's go, Thomas.
I said that, but being as new as I am, I can't really say what challenges I'm going to face other than being new.
Sure. So that's a good point, Thomas. As a new guy, how you can treat these as rhetorical questions, because I don't want you feel like I'm trying to get you to throw your boss or your organization under the bus, or defend them unnecessarily. Remember this academic non-attribution here, guys. But as a new guy, are you finding that the data landscape, for lack of a better word, as some people would call it, an enterprise architecture? Are you finding that stuff is documented? Is there a data dictionary for the stuff that you'll be working?
I think there is quite a bit of documentation. It's not specifically consolidated necessarily, but from what I can tell, just about everything, there is a way to reference the information. Maybe like I said, maybe in different locations, but yeah, from what I can tell, there is. I think a lot of challenges might just be, becoming familiar with those locations, or becoming familiar with particular databases that house particular information.
It could be, but just from my experience as a database developer, there could very well be software systems, especially internally developed databases, where the data dictionary is either old or non-existent. I put together a system, and now this has been a while, it's mid 90s, but I put together a system for buying ads in local newspapers for the Air Force to send to an advertising agency that would then put, for a career in the Air Force, contact Sergeant Smith, so they were customized for each recruiter's area. And I developed that database. It was an Oracle relational replacement for a kind of a DOS-based old DBase 3 PC-based database. And I developed it kind of like, because I had been working on that DOS-based system for a couple of years. I kind of did it back of a napkin, you know what I mean? But it was 10, 12 tables, and they were buying, 300, 400, 500 ads a day. So it wasn't a tiny system. Anyway, I never developed a data dictionary. I turned the only documentation on that data that an analyst would use, or even a future developer would use, before I left, which happens in the civilian world. You guys are free to change employers. Anyway, the only documentation I left was a hand-drawn diagram of how at the table level of how the tables fit together, not even the different columns and what they meant, and what you would be able to rely on that column containing value-wise, you know what I mean? So there will be times when the data isn't documented all that well, but you may not face that challenge, but it's not outside the realm of possibility.
Yeah, I faced it in my previous job, but yeah, I know what you're saying.
Yeah. And then organizationally, there's the challenge. Are any of you working with a dedicated data warehouse that is there purely for analysis?
I want to say that I am, but again, it might take me a minute to verify.
Okay. Well, we got 4 months, so I'm curious if any of you are using a data warehouse, or if you're pulling like I had to 14 years ago. I had to pull every day from those different systems, as opposed to going to a central system. And that includes, you got to log into 6 different systems, repeat different pull actions to get it down into like 6 different Excel files, and then start cutting and pasting columns. And but the data warehouse process does all that for you. So But it's not cheap. So it's really a cost benefit analysis for an organization to do. Any other comments on data management and the way that feeds your analysis? Data reliability, data availability.
All those, but I think, sorry.
Andra, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
This is really more of a personal issue, not to me personally, but people in general. Sometimes if people don't necessarily like the results of your analysis, they start questioning the credibility of your data. And that really just stems from if you can't measure it, it doesn't exist. So when you start measuring performance, it tends to kind of make people clam up because, oh no, now you're watching my every step and I might get fired. And that's really not the idea. I think more often than not, most companies, when they start doing this, don't even have a baseline. So that's really where the starting point is.
No, that's true. It's like in my experience, it would be starting a metrics program where you're going to start measuring different measures of performance. Like my last job in the Air Force, it was Freedom of Information Act cases at United States Central Command, which is the headquarters for all the Middle East wars, Iraq and Afghanistan. And we got hundreds of requests for information every year, and they were lengthy. And I started providing my management metrics, how many open cases, how many pages of documentation, how many hours were applied to that, to declassifying that information. So it started to kind of make some analysts want to cherry pick, the easy cases because so that they would look better in the metrics. So no, that's absolutely the case. And it brings up the point, Andra, of documenting the process. And that's the fantastic thing about this Jupyter notebook thing that I am going to show you at 11:30. It's irrefutable evidence of what you're doing in your analysis, because it's just a nice way to document what you're doing, why you're doing it, the code that did it, the data that you used to do it, all those sorts of things. So yeah, you will as an analyst, you will be consistently challenged. Where'd you get those numbers? Says who? How did you come to that number? How did you come to that conclusion? So your data analysis effort really needs to have a documented, you run this query on this database with these words, and you pull this data using these parameters, and every analysis has a kind of a paper trail, a forensics trail of what you did to get to there. And the more critical the decision is, the more important it is to have those steps documented, I believe. And was it Damon also had something?
Oh, I was just gonna ask a kind of random question about how long did it take you to make that relational database that you were talking about earlier? I'm just kind of curious about the timeline when it comes to, I don't know, how to implement certain things and whatnot,
Sure. Now, I was a database developer. That is what I did. I was in Oracle all day, every day, designing tables and writing queries and doing reports and data entry screens and all of that. So I was, at the time, I was, as fluent as you get at that level. And we were transitioning from PC-based single user kind of flat files, DBase3. They're not really relational. Anyway, we were transitioning from DBase3 to Oracle, and I got the opportunity to transition this DOS-based program that I'd been working on for a couple years. So I was super familiar with everything about that program. I did it. I coded it, developed the tables in Oracle, figured out how to migrate the data out of like 5 different PCs that were using this program all into a nice seamless Oracle multi-user system, and then fielded it, actually transitioned off those PCs and onto the Oracle database so that when folks came in the month of December, so that when folks came back from the holidays, I did the transition over the holidays. And when they came back, all the newspaper advertisements that they were buying were now in this Oracle application. Now it was the same stuff, but a completely different back end. And because they were no longer using separate PCs, you could access every transaction in the country. What they had been doing was there were 5 regions of the country, so you had to go to computer A if you wanted to buy advertisements in zone A. So it took me about a month, but I had been thinking about how would I do this, and then I got the go ahead. I had been working on that one where I told you where you go into the recruiter and they type in your information and we burp out the forms electronically. That was my main focus, and I was just the maintenance programmer on this advertising thing. But I'd been thinking about it and everything, and so I knocked it out in a few weeks. And like I said, it was 12, 15 tables.
Okay, I got you. Thanks for that.
Sure. So depending on the guy you're working with or whatever, and their how fluent they are, it really doesn't take that long to knock some of these things out. It's pretty amazing stuff, especially compared to the old COBOL days and whatnot. Any other data management challenges, analysis challenges?
I'll say in a past role, I've had trouble like picking up where other people left off on analysis, like with Excel files where they had done some data manipulation. Like if it's hard to see what work had been done to change the data, like I would have to start all over, pull the data again and just restart. So I knew like what the raw data looked like. So one thing I've learned is that it's good to show your work, like have the raw data in the file still. And as you transform it and manipulate it, have those stages so that you can see like, here's what the raw data looked like. If you're cleansing it, here's the cleaned up version.
So would you document that in a separate, like a Word document or?
No, I usually would just name like different tabs on an Excel file with what was manipulated. And if I had to do any calculations, I would change the color so you could see like this is a calculated field.
Okay, cool. Yeah, like
we've had a similar issue with that, Laura, as far as the analysis goes, when somebody just gets sidetracked or needs to get off that project. But that's why we started using a work log. So basically, whatever you've discovered in that analysis, you write it down so that somebody else can pick it up.
I've noticed in my current organization, they do log changes to a lot of our shared files. So I think that's a good process.
There you go. And logging changes, Laura, you just used 2 keywords. On June 29th, I got a buddy of mine that works at Axiom in Conway that's going to come in and talk about GitHub and the Git process and configuration management or version control, I guess would be a more accurate term. You can use this tool called Git and its associated website, GitHub, to manage from individual data scientists managing versions of their research with the code and the data and documentation, all the way up to huge corporations will use GitHub to merge changes together that coders are doing to different, Java files and database stuff, and even you can even version control documents. So it's an hour lecture, and it's something that anybody in this world needs to be able to at least speak to. Plus, there's just this huge amount of code and cool stuff available on GitHub that you can use. So we'll go over the configuration management process or version control process and a little bit more about Git on June 29th. So that's all good. No, and at 11:30, I'm going to pull up a Jupyter notebook and show you guys why that's kind of becoming a de facto standard for publishing research projects. It's just a pretty cool web-based thing. So any other? I thought I saw Brittany unmute. Did you want to say something, Brittany?
Sure. I was just gonna say, right now, our true source of data that we always go back to is what we call our legacy systems. It's our traditional circulation systems where all of our subscribers are housed. That's where we go back to reconcile starts, stops, revenue, average rates, frequency of deliveries, things of that nature. But as we are moving forward and wanting to get more data about our subscribers, such as what content they're consuming and when they're visiting and all of that stuff, right now, and we are in the process of resolving or improving it, but right now, like, our tech stack is clunky. So getting good data from our systems is really easy, but seeing the full picture and expanding on that right now is a little clunky for us.
What perfect world? What would help face that challenge?
That is not my world. I'm not the technology person, so I might let Aaron or Priyanka, if y'all have any input to that. All I know is right now, we've got data flowing from many sources into one source, and then that source puts out data. So Aaron or Priyanka, if you have any thoughts to what would make it better, feel free to speak up.
Yeah.
This is Aaron's world.
Yeah, it's way more complex than it needs to be. And we use all the Google products. So I don't know if you've heard of data prep, but you can basically take raw data and then format it into a format that you want to put into your data warehouse. Right now, we have this immaculate web of different wrangling steps that are happening, which are, I don't think that they're necessary. So it's just, I think there's a ton of cleanup that could go into it. And we have tons of filters and things that we're applying in our data visualization software. So when you pull the data from the source and you compare it to the data that's coming through in the visualization software, it very rarely ever matches. It's always a little bit off.
I'm seeing DataPress as being a WordPress plugin. Is that
data prep?
I thought you said you were using DataPress.
Oh, sorry, it's data prep.
Data prep. Okay.
And Aaron is absolutely right. Like, the way that we're solving for Z is, it's not just like this and this equals this. And that's how it should be. It really is that simple. Like, our business is really that simple. And it's just been overcomplicated over time. And so we're working through resolving and simplifying things. Because for my side, I know how the data is supposed to look and what makes sense. I just don't know what products out there can help us. And so that's where Aaron and our team is oh yeah, we can use this, CDP or whatever these things are called to get this. They definitely come in.
Sure. Generically, Aaron, correct me if I'm wrong, but generically we're talking ETL, extract, transform, and load tools. for pulling stuff from multiple sources and
Yeah.
transforming it and sticking it
I
in somewhere else.
I hadn't heard of that acronym, but yeah, that's basically what it does.
Yeah, ETL is the generic term of pulling from multiple places, doing any sort of conversion or merging, error checking or whatever, formatting, and then basically sticking it in the data warehouse is really the reason to do that. Yeah, ETL.
Domo has a really nice ETL conversion
Who does?
function.
Who under?
Domo.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a bunch out there.
And
There's
some auto connectors and like a workbench where you can store your data. Although I'm sure there's a size limit to that. So we were actually looking into Microsoft Azure as a data lake. But again, it's pretty pricey.
yeah, and
Gotta justify it.
yeah, and Microsoft uses one of their biggest ones is SQL Server Information Services, SSIS, and but there's, like I said, that Microsoft certified data engineer, that is what you guys are talking about. It's recognizing data, querying it, using all the power of these languages to clean it, consolidate it, error check, error proof it, and stick it somewhere where you can then run numbers on it confidently. ETL. All right. Well, guys, we are around to another 15-minute break. I hope we're not taking breaks too much. Would you guys rather sit for 4 hours straight without a break and look at Zoom? No? Okay. Okay, then we won't. We'll take 15-minute breaks. All right, at 11:30, I'm gonna finish off with we're gonna do something. Hopefully, you've got Anaconda installed, even if you haven't played with anything on the start menu. But if you don't worry about it. We'll share screen. But I want everybody to write their first program if they haven't. Some of you already written millions of programs, but if you haven't written a program lately, I want you to write your first Python program. So we'll come back at 11:30. Pause. Okay. So this hour, we're going to take a quick look at Jupyter Notebooks and Python coding. I will share my entire screen, which is always fraught with peril. Okay, so in your start menu, you should have under A, you should have an Anaconda link. Everybody got, unless you know you haven't installed it, in which case don't sweat it. If you have any trouble, shoot me an email. Be glad. Go ahead.
So just to get this, do we go to because I know like Aaron and I, we have Python, and that's what I think was in like your presentation on Tuesday, but do we just install something called Jupyter? Do we find this Jupyter and install this?
If you installed the Anaconda distribution of Python, it's already ready already.
Okay.
So do you have in your start menu, do you have an Anaconda 364-bit looking folder like I do?
Most definitely not. So I'll figure it out. We'll figure it out. So
well,
move forward and we'll figure it.
Okay. I don't want to leave you hanging on the installation though. But if you and I can well, here real quick.
Can you just drop the link in the chat or something?
No, I don't want to do that, but I'll just drop the link in the chat window.
And I will say I'm just working off of an iPad right now. My boss is trying to get me a computer to work off of as well.
Okay, you are going to go to, and I want to say, Chase, was it you that emailed me to verify the URL over the weekend?
Yes. I think I sent you something what I found, and you said it looked okay. Mine was for MacBook, but
okay.
Yeah.
Well, this is the URL. So now I'm trying to figure out how to get back into a display where I can see the chat window. Chat. More chat. Okay. So here's the URL. Anaconda.com. Products individual. And then there's just a great big download button.
Okay.
And you can pick your.
Yeah, I went to the bottom. I was gonna say I went to the bottom down there and shows the operating system, and it seems to be working okay. So
there you go. So you get the for Windows, get the 64-bit. Okay, so once you have it installed, you go over here to Anaconda, drop that down, and disregard my R tutorial. I have a couple of environments set up for Jupyter Notebook. You'll just click on Jupyter Notebook Anaconda 3. So if you click on that, you should get something that looks like the same view as your file explorer, whatever your default directory or whatever is for that. Everybody seeing that okay? So I would encourage you to set up something similar to what I've got. It'll make, if you set your, I'm talking like 3 folders under a Python directory. If you set those up like I do, it'll make my code samples work for you like they work for me, which would make it easier. So what I have done is on my OneDrive, in my documents, I have created a Python directory, and that's where I do all my Python work. So I click on that, and now you'll see these top 3 directories. If you create a data directory, particularly a data directory and a notebooks directory that are at the same level, and you can call these anything you want, but I call them notebooks and data because that's the way I was taught in a college course I took a couple of years ago. And then I have a lot of these other folders. These are whole documentation, data, notebooks, and everything that I've downloaded for my own professional development. But particularly if you make yourself a Python folder. I put it in OneDrive so that I'd be able to see it on my laptop when I travel. Beg your pardon. Notebooks and data. And inside of my data directory, that's where I keep all of my CSVs and text files and whatnot. That's where I put my input data. And then I will very often write my output to a TMP directory, temp, where I know that's not really worth worrying about. But some of these are like plot circles, PNG. I saved that was the output of a Python program. So that's the directory structure I use. And again, you see the Jupyter logo up here. What Jupyter is a web-based interface that talks to a Python interpreter. It's called an interpreted language because every command you type, when you run it goes through and checks it for syntax and executes it all in the same step. Down here, you'll see I've got a kind of a DOS window running. That's actually the Python program running in the background that the Jupyter Notebook talks to in order to make your Python code work. Generally speaking, I don't do anything in this DOS looking window. This is it's the back end of how it works as a programming language. If for whatever reason it's called your kernel. If you kill your kernel, suddenly your notebooks won't know what to do, because you won't have Python running to help your computer speak Python. Okay, so notebooks. I've been playing with Python for a couple years now. But so I clicked on my notebooks directory. You don't need to do that. You can stay like just in my documents for this one, for this example. So what we're gonna do is a new Python 3 notebook. So if you go up there and click on this is the Explorer tab is what they call that, because it's just like a file explorer. But if you click on new, and you can have Python version 2 and Python version 3 and R if you have R installed on your computer. You can create notebooks in any of those, so it lets you choose just in case you're using different versions of the language. But by default, all you have is Python 3. So if you say new Python 3, you should have an untitled tab. Somebody holler at me if you want me to stop. Okay. Now, have any of you like literally never written a computer program? Never, not in high school, not ever?
Me,
Yay.
I've never done
For
that.
the most part, I have not.
I'm a hello world guy here.
Well, that's what we're okay. There you go. Everybody's first program, if you've never taken a programming course, just to demonstrate the fact that this computer programming language actually does something, is to get the computer to say, "Hello world, I'm here." You know, so you are now writing your first Python program. Some of you maybe hopefully writing your first program at all. So there's a command in Python, and guys, I will screw up when I'm coding live. I'll screw up all the time because I've got so many languages in my head, and I only work with Python when I'm actually teaching it, generally, or playing with it, fooling around, challenging myself. That I'll screw up the syntax. So, but unlike Java, which writing the computer programming language Java that you might have heard about, that when you're and when you're using the web, you can't really get away from Java. Hello world in Java is just this epic adventure. It's horrible, but Python is perfect for learning. You'll see that as we go through the course. So print is a command that takes a parameter. Actually, it takes more than one parameter, but what its main parameter by default is what do you want to print? So we're going to use, in Python, you can use either single or double quotes to your choosing. I'd have to play with it to remember if I think it gets confused if you use double quotes at the beginning and one quote at the end. So whatever you're more comfortable with. If you're more comfortable using single quotes, great. I'm just by habit, I use double quotes. So the print command, you put in quotes, you spell it correctly first, hello world. So that is this green cell here in this Jupyter notebook is a code cell. And that is one line of code. Python doesn't need a semicolon or anything at the end like some programming languages. Gabe, you are smiling. Are you laughing at me, or is something else going on?
No, I just really like code.
Okay. Okay. Woohoo! We're geeking out. So type that command like I did, print hello world in quotes. You can print anything you want. And then you might think it's like executing a search command on a web page if you hit enter, but that's not like that. That'll just get you a new line. So when you're in a cell and you want to run the results, there's a few ways to do it, but for right now, all we got to worry about is clicking on this here run button. And you see underneath the code cell, you get the output of that code cell. So if you've just written your first Python program, I should be getting that woot woot.
Got it.
So this is the basics of a Jupyter notebook. This is an interesting departure for me as a programmer. I'm used to programming either just in a straight text editor, like Notepad, and then going back out to the operating system prompt, like a DOS prompt or a Unix dollar prompt, and compiling my code and then running the program and doing those sorts of things all in separate tools, or using what's called an integrated development environment, which if you taught yourself Visual Basic or Visual Studio, if you use Visual Studio for anything, or for those of you who have done some R coding, I know, Damon, you're all about RStudio, right?
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah.
And I've used Visual Basic too, actually.
Okay. Yeah, so an integrated development environment is, it's a little bit smarter about the fact that you're a coder writing code. And it'll have different windows for your code and your output, but it'll also tell you like the current value of all the variables that you've declared and what's going on inside your code and whatnot. And it's a little bit more nerdy, clunky, codey than a Jupyter notebook. Is really more about publishing and explaining what you've done with your code. So that's your Hello World notebook, and I'll show you a little bit more. We got a little bit more time, although I am really getting tired of talking. And the crowd says, "We're getting tired of listening." All right. So that's a Jupyter notebook. But one of the other cool things, and I'll do a more and more in depth as we get through into this thing. You can write a markdown cell, which is where you would document, like using, and I'll share the different formatting characters that you use for headers and whatnot. I think by default, anything that you type in is just text. I've got a whole tutorial on these formatting things that we'll go in later, but I wanted you to see what a markdown cell was. And then once you're writing a markdown cell is your documentation. So that is where you will explain what you're doing in the code, kind of providing that paper trail that we were talking about. And that, again, that's why they call it a notebook. So when you're writing markup and you use a formatting symbol like the pound sign here, that's to make a header. You have to execute that markdown to get it to look nice. So you hit run on the markdown cell. There you go. So and then up here you just play around with it, and there's lots of tutorials, and I'll get into it even more. But you can insert a cell above or below. There's any number of things. You can change the view. What do you call it? As you run things, you can have different code cells, which makes your program a whole lot easier to read, and it makes troubleshooting it a lot easier. I'll show you a more extensive notebook here. Yeah, this is the one we'll use that I'll go through, no kidding. Intro to Python and Jupyter Notebook. So this is a Jupyter Notebook, but you can see here, if I click in it, if I double click in a markdown cell, it shows the markdown code. And then if I run it, it turns it back into good looking, whatever you call that, executed markdown. And you can insert pictures. You can even insert, I've seen moving GIF files that show some scientific process in motion that pertains to the research being reported in the notebook. So it's really cool. And it's one file, the IPYNB. It's one file that is the notebook. Let me see real quick. I hate. Python notebooks. IPYNB. IPython notebook. And that file in and of itself contains all of this. Now, if you have an external data file, you have to distribute that along with the notebook. Your data won't be embedded in the notebook if you do use some form of external data. So yeah, anyway, these are Jupyter notebooks. These are separate markdown cells. I'll double click on them. You can start to see what it is. And I'll go through this tutorial at some point next week. So you'll have that to support your Python. And then here's some simple Python code. You can set a variable equal to, some mathematical operation and then print it out. Run now. You can say cell all output clear. If you've been running these cells and you're starting to get output and you want to just start all over again, you can clear the output. So if I run this, see, I have set my var equal to 3 plus 4 and printed out my var, which is 7 down here. And then hello world, this is my first program, so yay. So
May I ask a dumb question?
I don't think that you can come up with a dumb question because there are no dumb questions.
So they say.
Go ahead.
So why use the word print? Like, how do you know how to start that phrase? Does that make sense?
No, your voice trailed off, Andra. Ask that question again.
So when you first started the Python code, you used the word print.
Correct.
Why? Is there, like, how do you know how to start that? And in what instance would you use print or any other term?
Oh, it's every language, every computer programming language has a language reference manual, has an accepted syntax, and there will be. Now, how did I know that print is how you get something to come out on the screen? Is I was taught it, but there's all kinds of documentation out there as to what does what. Now, when you're a coder, when you're a programmer, and I'll get you there by the end of this course, there are generic things that a programming language can do. All programming languages can print to the screen. All programming languages can store the results of a mathematical operation into a variable, and that variable can be used throughout the program. All programming languages allow some kind of mathematical operation. You know what I mean? There's just things that they all have in common, and you just learn which one does what. Now, I want to say inside of
Is there a dictionary of some sort somewhere?
There sure is. On your help button in Jupyter Notebook, this is one of the more useful help buttons that I've ever seen. So for generic Python language, and I mean, I'm going to go through pretty much all the normal stuff throughout the course. So don't feel like you got to teach this yourself necessarily. But for reference sake, I go out and Google it. I'll Google because I know generically what I want to do, like how do I select the first 4 characters in a string variable, or whatever. I'll just go out and Google it. Oh, random numbers. That's what I was helping my son. He's taking a C++ class, which is another language. And he had a challenge, a programming challenge. It was a dice game. And in order to do that, you need to generate random numbers. So I went out to Google and I said, generating random numbers in Python. And it's super straightforward, easy to do. And it comes up on like tutorial websites as much as it does on the No Kidding D Python website. But you wanted to know if there's a reference manual for the Python language, and there is. If you click on help and come down to Python reference and click on that, it should bring up a new tab. Now I'm on Python 3.7. You guys are probably on Python 3.8. And I don't think much has changed. When you click on help and you go to Python documentation, what version comes up for you guys that have just installed it?
3.8 or 9.
3.8, yeah.
Yeah, 3.8.9 or.
Yeah, I don't think there's a significant difference. They bug fix and do little things in between versions like that. And I tried to upgrade from 3.7.1, which is where I'm at, to 3.8. I think was the newest one at the time, and I had trouble doing it. So I just need to figure out, and that's an issue of knowing how to maintain your Python environment, on your own PC. But anyway, this is the language reference. This is the official python.org. You'll see up in the URL window. This is the official language reference manual for the Python language. And tutorial, what changed in the version, all of it. The language reference will start to show all these different commands. Simple express, simple statements. I'm trying to find print. Control find print. It's not in there. Oh, come on. File input, screen input, output. Huh. The print command is not in there. How do I know that it's the print command? I took a Python course. That's it's got to be underneath one of these headers. There's got to be like an input output. Let's try that. Interactive input. That didn't help. Come on, where's the print command? Quick search. Print. Print. Just good old-fashioned print. The print command. Yep. That's maybe this is just illustrating why programmers get paid so much. Go ahead, Thomas.
The version I have is showing several print references.
Okay, good. Maybe that's one of the things they fixed was flaws in the documentation. I just got to not be finding it very well, but that's an excellent example. Like I don't use that help. I'll say, what is the print command in Python? The print function. And yeah, W3 Schools is one of the better websites that always pops up. And this gives you in much easier to understand than coursing through the help. Although once you understand the way the help files are formatted, it's very good. But like I said, I always go out to Google and just Google what it is I'm trying to do, and it has worked for me. See, so the first thing is an object, which a literal string, which is literal, a string literal is the hello world. But you can also print a variable, and we'll talk about the different types of variables and working with them and everything. So there you go, guys. That's your first Python program. I wanted you to actually do something instead of just listening to me talk. So you wrote your Python Hello World program. So next week, want to get into a little bit of stats, even though it doesn't really look like. I mean, we'll cover it because, like I said, I can't let you graduate without and say that we never talked about statistics. So we got to talk about looking at one variable, looking at the way two variables interact, bivariate analysis. You might have heard of descriptive statistics and inferential statistics. So we'll look at that sort of stuff next week. We'll get a little bit more into Python. I want to do a little bit of Python every week throughout the entire course, starting with the basic coding and moving on up into the data analysis stuff. But then we need to get into Excel and do some charting and look at functions and graphs. Do any of you have like very little or no experience using Excel?
I have very little.
Very little. Okay. Well, we'll do a tour of it. It's something you could hang on. I'm going to go off camera for just a sec.
That damn dog.
We certainly won't be able to cover the whole thing, but I'm going to provide. I mean, look how thick that is. I'll put it next to my face for reference, because you don't know how big my face is though, so that doesn't really tell anything. But yeah, the Excel 2019 Bible. I'll post this in the Excel. Now, please don't post it on Facebook for all of your friends. I got the electronic copy of this book off of academia.edu. I'm pretty sure it's like a fair use. But yeah, if you just use it just for this course, and if you want it, I bought it for $20 or so on Amazon. But I'm going to use this book to provide you with sample Excel data to work with, all that cool stuff, running statistics on columns and formatting data and using pivot tables, which are good for a certain type of data, really magical for some formats of data. And then all the necessary charts and whatnot so I want to use Excel as the easy to use, the individual analysts, go-to sword for slicing and dicing data. And there's a really, really robust set of, exercises and practice data that comes with this book, and it gives me some structure to go through. But we won't go too in depth. And like I said, we won't have anything to do with macros or creating a spreadsheet that you would then email around to everyone that would be this application that they would use. It's more of a identifying things in your data and using it for data prep, so that you can then trust it to use for whatever follow-on analysis. So that's what's coming up next week. I'm actively recruiting an Excel expert. I mean, I use it off and on for years and years, but I don't use it often enough that I'm like, yeah, that's how you do this, be able to spit out answers for you guys.
Hey, Don, I got a question.
Sure.
Kind of off topic, but the other day you were talking about companies are kind of moving from Excel kind of towards BI.
Mhm.
Is that just like, I've never used that before. Is that just like Excel on steroids, or how would you describe that? Like exactly?
Yeah, I would call Power BI desktop, Excel on steroids, and the kind of the cool thing about it is that instead of having tabs just across the bottom, you can have tiles, and you can make each tile its own widget, you know. And so yeah, it's and then you can share a like a an Excel spreadsheet is a file. Everything about it is an internal. If somebody changes something, it's only in that file, right? Unless it's got hooks, which gets dangerous, you know. But Power BI is made to publish as a dashboard while still reaching back into that data. So it might even be using some of the same naming conventions and code and whatnot, but it's really made for those public dashboards so that managers and users and whatnot can all see that data and interact with it. And if they do interact with it, it doesn't affect it for anybody else. Those sorts of things, you know, you can drill into data and whatnot with these visualization tools.
Okay.
But a lot of the same naming, a lot of the same. That's why it's kind of good to stay with one tool or the other. Microsoft, you know what I mean? Power BI uses a lot of the same terms and menu options and whatnot that you would see in Excel. So it'll seem a little more familiar. Okay. Any other questions about we got through our first week, guys. Woo! 1 down, 15 to go. Give or take. Any other questions or concerns that you want to go into now? Of course, you can always email me. Dwalker at acds.co. Okay. So, yep, we'll pick up Tuesday morning at 8:30. I wish you all a good weekend.
See you then. Have a weekend.
Hi, guys.
Have a good weekend.
Happy birthday.
Oh, yeah. Thanks.
Happy birthday.
Thank you.